Okay, and we are back. So tonight my plan is to kick things off with more UI testing in the material design in Xaml. I was going to update people on where I've gotten to, ran into a few problems, and so I decided to elicit some help from one of my brilliant coworkers, Mike. He will be popping on in a moment. So that is where we are going to be. So for people who are interested in following along, there's an outstanding PR on the material design in Xaml project. It is PR 1866. So you'll note the actual source code for this branch is coming from my fork. So if you are interested to actually follow along with that, there it is. One other update that I wanted to make people aware of. Out on my Twitter, I had actually posted I am going to be speaking at the Salt Lake City .NET user group. So for people who are interested, and actually, here, Mike, let's just bring you on. There's Mike. There's me. Everyone's happy.
Hello.
So I will be speaking. That will be a week from today. It's actually going to be, what is it? This is 5:30 Mountain, which is 4:30 my time. So it's 3.5 hours before normal streaming time, if that's confusing enough. You can click in if anybody's interested, and is free and open to everybody. You do have to sign up, but that's about it. So if people are interested in that. One other thing I was going to make a comment of is I've gotten a lot of questions from people about design principles and where do you go to, like you figured out how to write code, where do you go to learn how to actually write code better? The simple answer is that most of it comes from learning and practicing various programming patterns and principles. Bear in mind, this is where programming gets hard because these are not hard and fast rules. When you apply each of these is very subjective and needs to be applied appropriately to your problem that you're trying to solve. However, most of the time, these are good rules to live by. So DevIQ has a lot of them on here. The principles and patterns I really, really like, and quite often will link people to various ones, especially when I'm doing code reviews and see violations of them. This is usually my go-to because their answers are simple, short, they're language agnostic. Occasionally there's some small links or whatnot in them, but really good stuff here. Okay, that was a very long introduction. I'm normally not that long-winded, Mike. I promise. Okay.
All right.
So let me show you what I have built, and by virtue of this, go through and update everyone else on where I'm at. So in the material design project, I have a UI test project. Okay, nothing fancy. It's a Netcore 3.1 unit test, C#8, nullability turned on because yes, right. Pulled in a lot of default stuff. The part that started to get interesting is I now have 2 apps that I'm testing. I may get to 3, but I'm at 2 at least. So first app is just the straight demo app, which I think you've seen in the past, where its purpose in life is to go through and show off all of the styles and what's available in material design, right? Which is great. I think I lost your video, by the way. Did I lose you?
I hit the wrong button. I was trying to unmute myself.
Oh, okay. So the first one's the demo app. The only thing, and I don't mind running UI tests through it. Like my test for the demo app is literally just click through all the pages and verify that the app doesn't blow up. Not a great UI test, but for a bare minimum start, that's kind of where I was leading, right? The problem being is that I want to test very specific UI cases, and I don't want to code those into my demo app. I want the demo app to be about showing off what is there and not necessarily showing off failure cases. So to that end, I went through and made a UI test cases project. So again, WPF app. I'm doing Netcore 3.1. I'm pretty much ignoring testing the full framework one because so far to date, there have been exactly 0 bugs that have been tied to .NET Framework versus .NET Core.
Makes sense.
So it seems like a waste of effort to test both sides. So we could get to it.
So .NET 5 is in preview now, isn't it? So hopefully everyone is switching over soon.
Yes, but I highly doubt that. Like, I still get people requesting XP support on WPF. So
Okay, fair
.NET
enough.
Framework isn't dying anytime soon, as far as I'm concerned. So, and
Fair.
more importantly, is I'm not going to kill off support for frameworks that are still under Microsoft support. And I think .NET Framework like 4.8 has like an end of life of like 2028 or something.
Oh,
Like, it's got a very,
damn.
very long end of life.
Fair
So,
enough.
short version, I can't kill, like, I'm not going to kill support for anything that Microsoft is supporting. So, yeah. Whereas the .NET Core versions, they only live for a couple years and then they're dead.
Right.
So those we can keep revving. So this guy is in here. There's the MVVM light libs because I decided I wanted to do MVVM. I'm surprised this thing's still squawking at me. I thought I put in the NU7. I almost know how to check that in. I was going to say, I should have had the no warn on the NU1701 to tell it to stop pestering me. There it goes. Little yellow triangle away. So this guy is all about, and I'll fire this guy up and show you, because this is where I think I want to focus my efforts.
Okay.
So hence the two namespaces down in my UI test one for demo app and one for UI test cases. Stop debugging. I apparently am in release mode. I had an issue and I thought it was related to debug versus release, so I was confirming that. Turns out I didn't. That was not the case.
Nice.
I was not that stupid. Okay, so let's see here. Thinking. Has to recompile since I changed the framework. And launch. And of course it launches on the wrong screen. Okay, so you can't see it, but there's a grid here. 2 columns, 2 rows, right? Left column has a list of potential failure cases, right? Mm-hmm. You click it. It loads something into the right panel. There's technically this execute because a lot of tests are likely going to need some sort of setup or go and or something to indicate go and do the thing, right? So we can click execute. This guy here, the actual thing for the UI elements to test, you can test overlay, which all this button does is increment a counter, right?
Okay.
You can do show dialog, and the key part is when the dialog's shown, I should not be able to click past it.
Okay.
Because I tried to pick on something where we've actually seen a bug before on this, and this is something that has come up, right? Okay. So I shouldn't be able to click pass. I can close it, and then I can click it again. So this is the whole thing. If you hit execute test, it just resets the thing to 0, just to make sure if we redo things or whatever, execute kind of just puts everything back into a clean state. So that's the sum total of the app. Not a complicated app, right? So then the test case for it, I did, looks similar to this. So the structure with the test case base, I might show you this real quick. So I have this app class where I have coded in the paths to the apps.
Okay.
Relative. You'll note I did a little fanciness to be able to be intelligent about debug versus release because reasons. Right? So those go in there. That's all there. The actual test base class probably looks familiar to you. Actually, I think I can whack this now. Yeah, I can. That got moved out. This guy comes in, does your typical setup. There's a few fancy things that I did learn. So, one, WinAppDriver is only being done in debug currently because on the pipeline we're running in release mode. So I did not ever want to try and start this on my pipeline. So hands off. This is probably overkill and not necessary. I had it start waiting for the basically pause and wait until it can actually hit that socket. Just as a way of making it pause. I know I've seen other patterns where people loop and do other kinds of things.
Yeah.
This worked for now. So that is how I'm starting the WinAppDriver. Start the app. This is where it got a little fancy because if you spin the process yourself and call process start, you are responsible for terminating it on the pipeline, or your pipeline hangs forever, and it took me a while to figure out what I had done wrong. Because I had clearly done something wrong. I couldn't figure out what. And my pipeline hung. And after 15 minutes, I'm like, there's no way my test is still running.
Right. And just to interject real quick, there is a very fine line between letting WinAppDriver handle that and not. And in my
WinApp driver
experience,
can start the app for me too?
it can,
Oh.
but there's some limitations around it.
Oh, interesting.
Um, there is a hold on. It's been a while since I've had to think about this. I believe it's a hard coded wait time to where if your app doesn't start within a certain amount of time, it just fails. And so, in about half the apps that we've tested, they take longer than that time to start. So we have to start up our own process and manage it that way.
Interesting. So on one hand, I would hope that my app wouldn't do that, but on the other hand,
Right.
I could certainly see things. Hey, Kenny. Um, so yeah, so that is how I am starting my apps and passing those through, right? So I'm just doing some fancy stuff. The process info having to append the directory separator character at the end of it is dumb, but necessary. Believe me, I was annoyed at that. I believe this falls into some changes that they made around pathing in .NET Core, but don't quote me on that. So, yeah. So that is the whole setup here. So the next obvious question is, what problems are we experiencing? I'm glad you asked, since you clearly did. Let's go and let me show you the build pipeline. So
Sorry, I'm trying to find the snippet of code to let WinApp driver manage your application real quick.
is there on that note, is there a cheater way? What are your key search terms for this? Because I've been doing things like Appium, WPF, etc., etc., etc. Is there any smarter way of doing this?
Not really, because it's kind of a blurry gray area where there are certain things that they're Appium things that you have to search for. There are certain things that are actually Selenium things you have to search for. That's pretty rare because Selenium's mostly web-based, or is web-based, excuse me. But typically, if I'm searching for something, I'll do WinApp driver and then do the search, and that will usually bring me back to either Appium or WinApp driver. And then if you post something really obtuse on the WinApp driver GitHub, there's a good chance that I'll be the one that answers it. I try to be pretty active on there. I haven't been in the last month or so, but
I didn't realize that.
I try to be pretty active on the WinApp driver GitHub.
Note to self.
So
I've definitely been searching through it. I didn't notice you, but I wasn't digging through the issue list. So
yeah, like I said, I haven't posted in the issue list in a month-ish, but usually I try to pick the ones that haven't been answered and then try and answer them.
Oh, good to know. Because you are clearly the guy I need with questions. Because I have lots of questions.
So I just put in chat.
Got it. So I will grab that.
That might be the old way. Sorry, Selenium deprecated how they handle capabilities.
So let me see if I can find my appropriate place to put this. I would think that would go somewhere in the
additional capabilities. Oh yeah, right there.
Top level. Yeah, so basically this changes. So I've already got kind of something, right? So I would do this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I would ultimately feed this
your
this would
path.
be app path, right?
Yep.
And the API has apparently changed to be that and that.
Yep.
And then you were using the term session, but
yeah, it's a driver session.
Yeah.
I switch between them depending on how I'm feeling when I set up a project.
No, that's fair.
And then you won't have to have, if I remember right, you shouldn't have to have app top level window. That's only so.
Oh, because that's if you spin your own process.
Right. So that's literally getting your desktop and then saying, hey, give me everything that's a child of the desktop, which in this case, assuming your app starts up soon enough.
Well, in this case, I think when I'm grabbing, so the pointer I'm kicking back is actually the main window handle from the process that I spin. So in this case, it should be just my main window, which I was curious to see if you do this, how does it handle child windows? If I bound it to a window handle.
Right. So if you need, that's where it gets kind of interesting because if you need a child window of your main app window,
Mm-hmm.
the two ways I know of for searching for it are either just do a find element off your parent, your main window. Um,
Oh, it'll show as a child of my main window. Interesting.
yeah. Sorry, there's three ways. So either do a find element
Hmm.
off your main window, because it might be a child, depending on how it's coded. If it's
Wow.
a modal dialog, you can explicitly search for modal dialog windows. The third option is if it's a sibling to your main window, then you have to do that app top level window,
Got it.
get the desktop session, your root session, sorry, get your root session, then get the app top level window. Um, and it's kind of convoluted, but it actually works pretty nice once it's set up.
Yeah, there's a comment here that find child element is the magical invocation API for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but in this case, you shouldn't need that app top level window since it.
So if I spin it this way, okay, so we're gonna try this because this would theoretically
It's
significantly reduce my overhead, right? Because I no longer have to do that. I'm gonna leave the start win app driver for local debug because that's just really convenient for me.
it. Yes, it is.
And you'll note I had to get a little creative too with it because I don't install things to C colon. I have my C drive is tiny, so
Nice.
I just went hunting
Yep.
because D colon's a thing. And I tried hunting, like, I got desperate. I was like, there has to be a smarter way than just hard coding this whole path, right? I was like, and I went hunting for registry stuff. I went looking for examples. I couldn't find anything. I
No.
was like, I'm convinced there's an option somewhere because something knows about the installed applications, but
Yeah.
the only options I found were things like hunting through the start menu stuff, which isn't going to work. I tried
Nope.
looking for the installed stuff in the registry, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately all it does is it doesn't reference where it installed to. It references the location of the cached MSI to do the uninstall. I was very believe me, I spent a good hour and a half digging for that. Turns out I couldn't find it. So if anyone does find it, please let me know if there's a better way to locate WinAppDriver, because I'd love to have it started. Obviously, on a pipeline, it doesn't matter. We aren't going to use it. We're going to try this for now. So hold on. This duplicated that, so we don't need that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to leave a comment here. Only needed if we start our own process, right? Or if you don't own the process for some reason, yada yada yada. Okay, so the problem in question, right? So I'll spoil the surprise. The tests usually run fine locally. However,
Yep.
I have seen these same failures locally. So in question, what I have is, so it's trying to run my dialog host test, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going through when it's shown, overlay prevents clicking, yada, yada, yada. Great. And the key thing here that I'll note is the line number on the test. So the line number on the test is line 24. And I haven't changed this since that, so that should line up. So right here, so the result text block, and we'll get back to some of my other tests here in a moment too, but let me just control F5 this guy real quick so I can have him running and show you what I think is happening, because I also have some questions on setting this up in my XAML. So specifically, he's gone click here,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes hunting for this text block. Now, one, I would have assumed that click here would have been enough time for this thing to show up, since it shows up on here. But it does go really, really fast. So there is a chance that it is just going really, really fast. Because these clicks, like, when I'm doing it, I've got some amount of time. There's a ripple animation, yada, yada, yada. Like, it wouldn't shock me if you did all of those clicks at the speed of CPU that this wasn't loaded yet, right? Because it's not, for WPF, it's going to set the control, but it's got to wait for the next layout and render pass before it's actually going to trigger. So it ran through this. So it found so I've got this helper thing on my main window class that lets me find test cases in here. Right? It found it. It clicked on the test case, found the execute button, clicked on that, and then went to find this, the thing that wasn't loaded initially, which is why I suspect it failed, and it blows up. Now, my initial thing that I had done is I went and set this timeout to 5 seconds.
Right.
This doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, implicit waits are they I don't like to use them. They work in kind of not best case scenarios, but in kind of average scenarios, but they really fall apart when you have to fine tune your weights. So in this specific case, it's gonna wait 5 seconds for everything. So
And I was actually going to be okay with that, except for this thing timed out, and I have a hard time believing that my test timed out. And I've got other builds on this pipeline where this test passes just fine.
Okay.
So that's the part that's bothering me the most. Is it seems like the more I run the pipeline, I'm just rolling the dice, and I don't want to merge these things in. When they're going to just randomly, like a test that randomly fails gets ignored and then it's not even worth maintaining.
Yep. Totally agreed. So the way I would recommend going about fixing this or addressing this is ditch the implicit wait and we'll use an explicit wait.
So actually, hang on. I'm realizing something. Come back to the explicit wait because sorry, I'm going to derail you 1 second. I'm realizing that I may have checked in a halfway point, and that may be partially to blame here. But I do have things showing that case of the timeouts. So here is the actual UI elements for this guy, right? And so this is the dialogue that gets shown itself. This is the text block here. Okay. This is one of the things I wanted to ask about. This is going to test your WPF knowledge then a little bit.
Okay.
Automation properties name versus automation ID.
Yes.
Can you break those down? Because right now I feel like I'm rolling the dice and picking one.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I can quite explain this in WPF language, but in WinApp driver land or in automated testing land, name we more commonly see associated to like an OK button. The name is almost always also OK. So it doesn't quite correspond to text, but usually we see those things correspond, whereas automation ID is literally anything you want it to be. Now, if you're not using the name for anything, then I don't believe it matters. We tend to like to use automation ID just because it's its own separate thing. Someone's not going to come back in and change it on us, and we can make them unique, basically.
So, and this is where I got a little confused because I ran into the issue of here. So I've got the thing running, right? Let me. What is the name of the lovely
accessibility tools?
Yes.
Or accessibility insights?
Yes, the magical. I want to put a blue box on your app and annoy you to no end. Update later. I don't feel like updating right this second. Sounds like a bad idea. Okay, so if we look at this guy, right? So, and here's where I was starting to get a little weirded out. So, I've got this automation ID here, right? But name, and this confused me. Name seems to this name here seems to correlate to the text of the text block.
That.
Now it gets a little more weird for me. If I go up here, right? This guy, I ended up setting an automation properties name on because without it, it wasn't lining up to what I expected. So I was very confused as to when to use each.
Typical scenario is always use automation ID because the name, and this is the part where I probably need to learn more about WPF, but I know.
So I'm gonna switch these two buttons then real quick because I would like to use automation ID. Oh dear heavens. Highlighter off. Please go away.
Right.
And I think so.
And I think you had just dot ID. It needs to be dot automation ID.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Yep. And this is where I probably need to learn more about WPF, but I know the name is not like there's ways to override like that X colon name I've used before, and that propagates to the automation name. But I don't know if it's overridden. Like that's the part where I probably really need to learn more about WPF.
Yeah, because there's clearly a hierarchy between all of these things, and I don't know
Right.
what that hierarchy is. Okay, so proof is in the pudding. Let's run these tests. So I very intentionally did not put a dependency between these projects so that it can compile the unit test. But oh, it's probably going to try and compile the other one because I changed those automation IDs. Hang on, you're probably going to fail. Oh, build succeeded. Is it going to go? Oh. It's thinking. I may have shot myself in the foot there. Test Explorer. Yeah, so you ended up so this may actually be a legitimate failure, and this let's see, what did you fail on? Line 28. So yeah, so this is where I started running into problems because it seemed like, so find element by accessibility ID, right? I'm using the same thing, two elements side by side.
Right.
And the problem I was running into, not that one, I need to limit myself on what I have open. Close, right? So what I was running into is I wasn't able to actually locate the button by the accessibility ID. So if we do this.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it doesn't want to minimize for you.
Focus, pause, stop moving around, right? So you'll note that even though I set that name, and let me just for my own sanity, I am going to close and force recompile this guy because there isn't a dependency between these. It just launches from the bin directory.
Okay.
So there is a very real chance that it just forgets to compile and just starts the old one.
Mm-hmm.
Because reasons. But I have found it convenient, especially when writing the test, to just be able to leave the app running. And
yeah,
I think at some point I might get to the point where I tell Visual Studio that there's a dependency between those projects, but I don't know if it really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from confusing me every so often. So if I do this, that guy goes there, grab my old obnoxious friend, turn him on.
So if you scroll up.
Scroll up.
Is that the automation ID you set?
That is the automation. Test overlay button, right? So test overlay button.
Mm-hmm.
But yet that also appears to be the one that it failed to find. Let me rerun the test just to make sure that I am not crazy, because there is a reasonable chance that I am crazy.
Well, also Selenium is really finicky. Like
yeah,
I've
found that it. So that was fun. It apparently decided to open my email, and more importantly, it conveniently relaunched a new version of the app.
Yes. So that.
Oh, because I'm no longer in charge of the process.
Right. So that snippet of code I gave you will relaunch every single time. There are ways around that, but kind of the typical behavior is the assumption that you're going to launch a new version of the app every time to make sure it's a clean instance.
Got it. Okay. So real quick, question on what the goal is for tonight. So right now, my ideal goal would be to fix my tests so that they are stable, so that this PR can merge. That would be my ultimate goal. I've got other questions of how to add more tests to test other things, but ultimately, if I could get this one UI test working.
Okay, so can I ask you to re-show me something you already showed me?
I will show you anything you'd like. Hit me.
Can you relaunch the app, but don't do anything once it's launched? in between pulling it between different screens, I want to make sure I saw what I saw.
So this is the empty state of the app. I have done
Okay.
no clicky.
So what's the first step that happens? You
So
click on
as
the
part,
dialog?
so as part of the UI test, the first step is click the item in the list, which
Okay.
you'll note populates the right portion. I realize I'm pointing to my monitor and you can't see where my finger's pointing, so I'll use my cursor.
I'm inferring. Thank you.
So it clicks there. It clicks execute, which on a clean app launch is pretty minimal because, or I should say, doesn't matter because it's all that does is reset the clicks to 0. It then goes through and tests the overlay, so it does a click and verifies that this count increments to 1.
Okay.
It does a show dialog to pop the dialog over the top. It then tries to click this button again, verifies that the click did not increment, closes the dialog, clicks the button again, and verifies this went to 2.
Yeah.
So,
and it typically fails on the first test overlay click.
So the ones that the 2 failures that I have seen, and maybe I'm conflating a few things, because I don't, given that I think I may have checked in with that implicit wait and had that automation ID failure, I may have just been misreading my bugs and thinking I had a bug that I didn't have.
Okay.
That is possible. The 2 failure cases that have been the most problematic have been initially grabbing the text block or grabbing the button because reasons. Also, nullability in WinAppDriver or Appium, pain in the neck. Am I correct in the assumption that this method will return me an element or throw?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, that was my assumption based on looking at the behavior. It means that now all of my statements end in exclamations, so I get to have my code yelling all the time.
Nice.
It's great.
Yeah, and that's where the explicit versus implicit wait comes in. That for the, if I'm understanding right, line 24 and 28. So the, real quick, rolling back to implicit versus explicit wait. And so the implicit wait that you had, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. You're telling, at the very lowest levels, Selenium, that anytime you do a thing with Selenium, if it doesn't succeed right away, retry for 5 seconds. I don't remember exactly what the polling interval is, but essentially it's polling is what it's doing.
Okay, makes sense.
So, nothing inherently wrong with that.
Didn't find it, wait for some period of time, try again.
Right. The challenge with that is it makes it impossible, actually, to tailor those weights for different scenarios. So, in your case, that first click on line 21, if you know that is always going to work as soon as the app loads, and it should fail if it doesn't, the implicit weight's kind of a bad thing there, because if something happens and there's a bug where the click doesn't work, it will always wait 5 seconds before it fails out, which on one test is not a big deal. On 500 tests, that's...
I see. So because I know something about how long each of these calls should take.
Right. And that's where the explicit weights come in my opinion, as the best option, because you can tailor your weights for each scenario.
Got it. Because that is a bit of a problem that I will have. Like, for example, this show dialogue, the whole thing I think takes a third of a second to finish animating. This dialogue should be blocking clicks after like less than maybe 100 milliseconds. I'd have to look exactly what it is. But the moment this thing's opacity starts animating off 0, it should be blocking clicks. So it's fairly fast. But there is some amount of time that it needs to wait before trying to come over, because obviously this close button isn't there right away. It has some animation time, and it's about a third of a second, which I set that implicit wait to 5, and now you're making me want to go back and change it and make it significantly lower.
Right. Right.
I think that was your goal. Good work.
Oh, thank you. And that's the challenge with implicit weights, is the implicit weight has to be as long as whatever the longest action is going to take. Okay. So,
Well, I can say for certain that inside of the library, I might have to go check the transitioner. I'm fairly confident that every animation in the library is less than a second long.
Okay.
I mean, obviously outside of like infinite progress bars and whatnot and those types of things, which don't count.
Sure.
But the animation toggling between states, I think in any visual state manager, I don't think anything's longer than a second, and I think most of them are under half a second.
Okay.
So I think maybe starting here is probably reasonable because I think that's. Do you know what this thing defaults to?
If you don't set it explicitly,
Yeah.
then there is no implicit wait. So if you
don't, so it'll just die immediately.
Right. Yeah. So if you whack line 37, it's just gonna barf whenever it can't find something or whenever it can't click on something or.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. I think I do like this thing running this. I'm a little torn. In the interest of simplicity, for tonight, I think using this is probably nicer, simply because it lets me leave the app running, and I know that I've set up my execute to reset my state.
Right, and honestly, I usually set something like that up when I'm debugging anyway, just so I don't have to rerun the whole test.
Yeah. Because that I think that makes a little more sense. If nothing else, it lets me position this window where I want. I'm trying to. There is a Windows command where you can tell Windows, this is the starting position of this app. Please always restart it here.
Seriously?
Yes.
Oh.
I need to look up what it was. It was posted by Kendra, the Microsoft PM for the testing stuff in Visual Studio. And I don't remember what it was. I might have to go back and look at her Twitter. Kendra Havens, I think is how you say her last name.
Nice.
Got Heap is the Twitter handle for anybody who wants to go look her up. Great stuff. Most of it all related to the testing stuff in Visual Studio. So if you've got questions on that, she's got answers. Okay. So let's talk through that explicit wait then. So if I wanted to implement an explicit wait, I assume it's all around this find. And this kind of falls back to what you had built before, right?
Right. And this is where Selenium in general starts to get really interesting because their explicit find, there's actually two of them. There's the what's called WebDriver wait, but then there's also what's called a fluent wait. As far as I can tell, a fluent wait is just a WebDriver wait with fluent syntax, as far as I can tell. So pick your poison. I usually just do a straight WebDriver wait. But essentially what it is, and we actually paired on something very similar 2-ish years ago.
Oh, you're going to make me remember back what I did 2 years ago? I was young and stupid back then.
Well, same, but... it was actually Chris Finlayson found a post from the primary C# maintainer who was like, hey, no, this is silly. Here's how you use a WebDriver wait. But it's all based on delegates. So you don't technically have to hand in just a find element by accessibility ID. You can hand in anything you want. I've handed in entire statements that are like, click this, verify this, and then click this other thing, because in certain apps, if you don't do all three of those, everything fails. So I've created an explicit wait that does those three things. But anyway, long story long, all of those are driven through the WebDriver wait class. So before
wait. There's the magic sauce. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yes, yep.
So I go up here, right?
And new up a WebDriver wait, and you'll want to hand in, or you will need to hand in the driver, and I believe the wait. Oh yeah, the timeout.
Driver. Time span.
And you can also change the polling interval. I believe that's one of the overloads. If you care, but it's
okay.
Yeah, it's the default is 100 or 250 milliseconds. I don't remember which. It's a small enough interval that almost never change it.
So the first parameter here wants an iClock. Where do I get an iClock from? So the two overloads, right, is the first one. The simple one is a driver and a timeout. I got that.
That's the one that I pretty much always use.
The other one takes in a clock, and I don't know where to get a clock from.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Var clock gets new clock.
Can you go back over?
System clock. Hey, that sounds like. Is there a reason I can't just reuse this sucker? What is on this thing?
Date time.
It uses the system clock to calculate time for timeouts.
That's just.
So it's literally abstracting date time now. Got it. Okay. This is kind of fun though, because
right?
I could have fun with this interface. Is now before, later by. Oh, that is hilarious. Okay, side note, small tangent, right? Whenever I see interfaces that look like this feels like these should be extension methods.
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure all implementations are probably going to do the exact same thing. And the only thing that, at least my implementation of these methods, all I would need access to is now.
Yeah.
And then you keep your interface nice and thin.
Mm-hmm.
So, pro tip for people. Thin interfaces. Also, that's the answer to one of my questions in my talk next week. So, I am going to actually go all the way down into my test base, and I'm going to just do this real quick while I'm adding this thing. So, protected iClock, clock. Spelling's hard. Don't judge me. What was it? I was telling my wife something tonight, and I was like, I can't even spell it, and then I proceeded to get my spelling wrong. She's like, yeah, I believe you now.
Yeah, it happens, especially when people are watching.
I know. I wonder if that means a lot of people are watching. The general rule is the more people that watch,
right.
So time span from milliseconds. So I'm going to make this thing pull. So if this thing sleeps for 100 milliseconds, that means I'm roughly going to pull probably 10-ish times, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know something about the underlying time APIs in C# and their accuracy. And I think it's like 100 nanoseconds. So this will probably get me pretty close.
Mm-hmm. And again, 100 might be. I don't remember exactly what the default is, but it's small enough that I pretty much never change it for the applications that we test, which are, slow corporate desktop apps.
Well, this is material design. We build fast, pretty-looking applications here.
Fair enough.
Okay, so then what do I do with my new wonderful weight friend?
So now you have to tell it which exceptions to ignore, because again, as you pointed out earlier, find element by accessibility ID will either return an element or throw. So you have to ignore exception types.
So this feels yucky.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna get worse.
We're writing extension method. So do I really? Because there's basically one exception type, right? Like the vast majority of times when I see failures, it's where is it? Scroll over.
WebDriver exception.
Yeah, this thing.
Yeah.
This is like the only thing it knows how to throw.
So here's my small rant. Here's my big beef with, I don't know if it's Appium or WinAppDriver. I don't know which one it is. If you deal with straight Selenium will throw informative exceptions. Find element, if it fails, will throw a no such element found exception. If an element is found but it can't be clicked on, it will throw element not interactable exception. Either Appium or WinAppDriver, I'm not sure which, so I don't want to speculate. One of them basically wraps all of those in a WebDriver exception, and it may
because yeah. Thank you, Kenny.
Yeah, and it makes, as you're about to find out, it makes handling exceptions really annoying, because it's like, well, what if I only want to catch when there's no element? What if the overlay is there and it's not supposed to be? Then I want to throw right away. So anyway, so it makes handling exceptions, specifically with desktop apps, annoying.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious.
There might be a way to
If
override it.
I
I
was going to say,
haven't.
if you'll indulge me for one moment,
Sure.
I am curious. Do you know about? So I agree that it's throwing a really horrid exception, right? But I'm curious to look at if there's anything in the, let's see, foo and not found, right? I'm
Hmm.
curious to know if there's anything in like the exception data that would actually contain information about it.
Hmm.
Just hypothetical.
Yeah. No, this is great because I started to look into this once, but I don't remember what I found.
You found that you hated WebDriver exception
Yeah.
and a
Yes.
soapbox.
Yes.
So thinking, click, click, and then boom. Okay. So it did throw the exception.
Hmm.
Let's go looking at what we have. Boy, I need to figure out why my extension doesn't edit this one. So on my exception, I am in fact a WebDriver exception, which is awesome. The inner exception is null, which is
No, yeah.
awesome.
That's right. That's what it is. I would have had to filter by message because the message tells you. But
Yeah, and this guy here is, so there's nothing in the data, which is overly not helpful,
mhm.
which is great. So there's basically nothing. So something, I mean, I would start working this unpack and throw on air. I might hunt that method.
Right.
That one seems to be highly problematic, but okay. So this guy is throwing WinAppDriver yeah, so one of these guys might need to receive a pull request from me at some point.
Right.
Possibly Appium.
Yeah, and that's where
Yeah, because
I
I'm willing to
yeah.
bet there's some weird like IPC process communication going on, but
Hmm.
that is yucky. Because
Yeah.
clearly those other exception types exist. So
Right. Yeah, and like I said, if you deal with straight Selenium, you'll get a no such element exception on the find element if it fails. So anyway, dealing with what we have, the next step then is to do a wait until, and that's going to take a func of type.
oh, lovely, and it can return results.
Uh,
So I can just put whatever
yep.
I want in here, right?
Yep.
So I can do something like go and grab my
Yep.
this lovely thing, right? So
And just return it.
and then this goes to here, and it's probably can't. Oh, it should be able to derive the generic type, can it?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause
It
from the
can, but
return-
it's specifically it takes an iWebDriver as an input.
So
You already declared, but yeah, so it's
so I shouldn't use my big driver D. I should use lowercase little driver D.
yep. Which fun fact? After we went through the
What did you do to it? Oh, because it's an iWeb driver and this thing is a Windows driver.
that
Oh, you jerk. The type is different, and apparently the methods available on each are different. Okay, so first rule, go to full statement so that we can debug this a little more clearly. Okay, so what exactly do you come with?
oh yeah, that's the straight out of the box Selenium driver. That's not.
Now, I don't doubt that it's passing it through, but me and you gonna have problems. So, okay. So, hypothetically, find element, right? And I can do by ID, right?
Yep. Yeah, it should be ID.
It's yucky, and more importantly, I could write an extension method that wraps this up and hides it from me.
Right. Oh, you'd have to cast it to a Windows element.
You are. So I was going to ask you about that because I've run into this multiple times. Is
Hmm.
it fair inside of Appium when UI testing WPF elements to assume that I'm not going to get web elements and assume that everything's a Windows element? Because I ran into that here, right? So, uh, yeah. So this get test case, right? So
Right,
I find the list box that has
right,
the whole list of things, right? I then say find element by test case name. So I want to go
yep,
hunting by in the list box by that guy. But at this
yep.
point, I get an Appium web element, not a Windows element.
Correct. Yeah, for whatever reason, so there's two different find elements actually. There's a find element from your driver, which is what returns the Windows element, but then you can do the find element off of another element, which is what you did on line 21.
Right.
For whatever reason, WinApp driver did not. Um, I don't know if it's an extension method. I would love to look at their source code, but they haven't open sourced it. I'm hoping they do at some point, but for whatever reason, a find element off of another element does not return a Windows element. That is expected. The way that we've gotten around that,
Can I just upcast?
yeah, you can.
Shoot, I'm going to clean you up because this bothered me.
Yep, that's what Sean and I did um, when he first ran into that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's that's expected, unfortunately." And so we just started casting it, and we haven't run into any situation where it's made a difference. Again, I would love to look at their source code to know what they're doing under the covers to find out why they're not just making that a Windows element, but maybe in time.
So this is effectively the whole bit of the weight, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, well, proof is in the pudding. Let me run. I do technically have code in my base test class that's supposed to bring the window forward.
Mm-hmm.
However, I learned that the Windows API for focusing a window, there's like 8 caveats on when it will work and when it will just quietly fail.
Yep.
Which is great that they've clearly documented its failure cases.
Mm-hmm.
Timed out after 1 second.
So this is where it gets weird. Accessibility ID might not line up
With
to
find by
Selenium
ID.
ID. Yeah, and I haven't actually searched for an element that specific way, but really?
Hold the phone here. We got an idea. So decompile.
Oh, is this their new?
Oh, why do you not an air
Uh,
load? Apparently, I need to do something. See, text editor C#. There is a new. Yeah, apparently certain pages, just the property pages aren't loading. You'll note this is the preview Visual Studio, so I'm gonna call it a bug. It could be something with my state. I'm not sure. I need to just run the update. I know there's one pending. There is a. Where is the new? There's like preview something or another. Preview features, right? Model binder. Fakes for .NET Core, which excites me to no end. IntelliSense. There's a new go-to decompiled thingamabobber,
yeah.
and I don't remember what it is or where it is. And part of me is wondering if it's hiding on this page that shows up when I type in the words decompile. Because it's bothering me that the page I want to go to is not there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted to look at what this guy was shelling out to.
Right. Can you go up to line 32 and
Yes.
delete the ID and do your dot again so we can see the intelligence? Thank you.
Yeah, so XPath name link text. And I know before when I was dealing with the base level items, I was very much struggling to figure out how to make these things work. XPath I was able to make work.
Yeah.
which not overly shocking, right?
Right.
CSS selector, never got it to work. Again, not
It
shocking in a WPF app.
yeah, say it doesn't work with WPF. It's not implemented, I should say.
Again,
Um,
didn't overly shock me that it couldn't find a WPF element with a CSS selector. I was like, okay,
right.
I can let that one slide.
Right.
Link text I had minimal luck with. I feel like I
Yeah.
was able to get something to work when I threw a hyperlink in, but it
Right.
was
Yeah.
late and I was just throwing things against the wall to see what would stick, and
Yep.
it kind of felt like I threw something sucky at the wall and it kind of stuck a little before sliding down and making a gooey mess.
Right. So
That's how I remember link text.
I'm looking at their page on supported locators, and accessibility ID maps to, well, I mean, as we know, automation ID, but
Can
again,
you
I would
share the
love to
page?
just,
Can you
I
share the
would,
page that you're on?
I can.
Because I don't recall coming across that. And again, I think some of it is I've just been very noob-esque when it comes to figuring out what to.
All right, it's in chat. I always have to look it up. I can never remember. I should just bookmark it, but, and so here's the part that, again, I would love to see their source code, because I want to see how they're mapping. Oh, you scrolled away from it.
Oh, sorry, I was going to the top because I wanted to see where this was at. So this is actually all the way. So this is just straight up in their README, buried deep in the bowels. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, it remembered my thing rather than jumping me to the.
Oh.
Support.
Nope, there. I just saw it. Nope. Sorry, never mind. I saw.
I think it was below. I think it was below all of these.
Yes, there it is.
Okay.
So again, I would love to just see what they're doing underneath the cover. So I don't know if they're converting Find by Accessibility ID to XPath. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing there. I would love to know what's happening. I mean, we could always use an XPath.
I kind of want to know though.
Oh, right.
So dn spy run command. So let's just hypothetically say I really, 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 really want to know what this method does.
Mm-hmm.
So we F12 that guy. It jumps me into something, but what I'm interested in is this guy up here, specifically, which is in my NuGet cache. I come over here, I go open, I go paste, and I go whatcha.
Oh, that's neat.
And now we're off to the races. So let's go have a little peek-see and see. Let's see where is there's a navigate to symbol in here. Is it just search assemblies? Yeah, that's probably what we want. And I am specifically interested in find element by accessibility ID. So find by accessibility ID. So I think probably here. Okay, so it takes. So it's calling find element. It's using this mobile accessor called accessibility ID. Is this thing? Oh, it's public. Huzzah!
Yeah, that's Appium.
And by value. So I think I have access to this, right? So I should be able to do exactly this.
Yeah, you should. I'm pretty dang positive that's just an out-of-the-box Appium selector.
So that's my selector. Let's see. Did I get too many closing parens here? I did. Okay. And then you just need to be imported. Find element. Oh, do I not have access to that overload? I don't. So I need to go by, and I think one of you has a. How do I convert you?
Does mobile selector not inherit from by?
Well, this is just a straight string, right? So hang on, let me go back and look at because I don't have this overload that takes, because this doesn't exist. So let me
Gotcha.
just follow the rabbit really quick and figure out
Mm.
where this goes. Base find element. Oh, hello Houston. So that is outside of this guy completely.
Mm-hmm.
By value. So it's shelling out remote web element. So base types, remote web element. So remote web element
That should be,
is,
yeah, that's not Selenium.
yeah, but it's not in here. So I can't chase the rabbit any further, which is disappointing. Usually, so dnspy will actually run through referenced DLLs. And you'll note that, so I'm noticing just a few things in here, right? So, where was I? I was in here. Appium web element, base types. So this is remote web element. So this guy must be dynamically loaded. Let me just see if I've got access to him. Aha, I do. Gotcha. Come here, sucker. You are in a different assembly, aren't you? That one.
Yep.
Hello, dnspy. I need your help again. I would like you to open that DLL. Gracias. It's almost too easy. It's this close to too easy.
Nice.
So, and that was specifically inside of
Remote.
OpenQA Selenium Remote. OpenQA Selenium Remote. Remote WebDriver. Is Remote WebDriver not an iWeb? So iWebDriver must not have it, is the kicker. Right? So find element, this guy.
Oh yeah, string.
So this guy is ultimately shelling all the way down to here. So it's interesting. Okay, and then does the by end up doing the same thing? By find element this. So what is that doing? So
Oh,
that's a
right.
very, very different. Okay, so these are two very different code paths.
Mm-hmm.
Yuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yuck. I don't think I am adequately expressing my distaste for this. Okay, so web app driver. What exactly do you have on you? URL title, don't care. Actually, expand out. I want to look at you this way. So so iWebDriver has pretty much nothing directly on it.
Mm-hmm.
Search context might be more interesting. What do you have on you? So you are the one that has the find elements,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we saw the thing being invoked by. So basically, part of my problem is the moment we get down to WebDriver, I lose all my stuffs.
Yeah.
Is there an alternate interface I could cast this to make this work and have it not be sucky? So I suppose on one end, okay, so we could cheat, right? Like,
I was say the simplest would probably just be to use your big D driver.
so I don't disagree with you, though I'm prepping to make this an extension method, so I kind of want to do it inside and just, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cast this guy up,
Mm-hmm.
solve, and that fixes this casting problem now too, right? Because now I can do find element by ID. Boom. And I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is your problem now?
You still need to wait. What?
Wait until Windows element. It's like I whacked too many close.
Do you still need to cast the return to a Windows element?
I I don't think so because this guy is now going to return a Windows element.
Yep.
Okay, I got to start collapsing this back down because I've clearly dropped one too many parens. So there's lower D, upper D, close, scroll over just a teeny bit. I know this looks like a long line, but it's not as big as it looks.
Close. Can you hover over result that text box real quick?
It wants a semicolon. Am I crazy? But last I checked, this was a
semicolon.
I was like, that's a semicolon, unless I'm mistaken. Okay, I'd like to think I know.
Can you hover over it one more time?
Yep.
The name of this line. Wait until.
So.
When?
I'm gonna do this, that.
Oh, line 29. It's.
Oh, because I did that like a moron. Thank you.
There it is.
Thank you. That's why I need you. Okay, so there's. Okay, so let's. Same song, third verse. I'm very tempted to also have to set like topmost on this guy. Because right now I'm relying on the fact that the tests take a while to start and I can click on the window before they get going.
Yeah.
Because there was one time I didn't get quick enough. Whatcha?
Oh.
Test pass!
Hey, there we go.
Booyah! You are awesome, Mike.
Thank you.
Have I mentioned that recently?
Well,
you should get
just,
told that.
What's the saying? You do enough, what is it? You do enough wrong to know what not to do? Something like that?
So, I'm kind of wondering then, so one, this whole mess, I'm thinking is about to become an extension method, right?
Yep.
Because I do not want to do this every time. That sounds miserable.
Right.
However, what I do want to do is ask a couple minor questions. So I have been throwing in these task delays here. And I think that's probably the only way for this to work. Oh, I closed my app down. Simply because I've got those animations, right? Would you propose that I not have the delays here and instead do more explicit waits?
Yes.
And wait for the elements? So these things theoretically run much quicker if I do that?
Yes. And
because obviously there is some amount of time that I'm doing that I'm simply show dialogue. I know that there's about a third of a second animation time, so I set it to half a second just for buffer.
Yeah. And the nice thing with the wait is because it's just taking in a func, you can pass in that click, and if the click throws, it'll just catch it and retry.
So then, okay, so I think rather than this guy here, right? So I don't want. So I need to test for the presence of this close button first. Before I do this click, because this click I'm testing the failure case, right? Like I'm expecting that the click doesn't go through.
Right.
Which is great, right? That's kind of what we're going for. So I think then what you are proposing, well, let's start with this, right? So I kind of want to do, trying to decide what to do it on, and I think, so let's come down here. Here. What do you normally call it for your Appium? I'm trying to think. So I know it's not kosher usually, but
right.
So the main library uses helper as a container for attached properties. I don't think we actually. I normally use mixins, but I don't think. Yeah, we use helper in most of our other cases, so we're gonna stick with helper, despite that it's not what I normally use, but it's what's used elsewhere in the app, and I'm not in a refactoring mood at the moment. So I'm thinking I'm thinking what I would really like to do is not have all of this. And
Right.
instead, I think what I want to have is something more akin to Windows element gets driver
Mm-hmm.
find element by accessibility ID. We'll fix the nullability garbage while I'm in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I want something like time span from milliseconds, because this should be quick, right? So this should be more like
Right.
that. So I think that's the API I want,
Mm-hmm.
and have it not suck.
Yep.
Will
Yeah.
this until ultimately throw an exception if it times
Yes.
out?
Yeah. If it does time out, it'll throw a WebDriver timeout exception.
Excellent. So we want this, and we want public static. What is it? Web? No, not Windows element. Find element by ID, string selector, right?
Mm-hmm.
Time span, timeout. Boom. Right, so we're just gonna, and we need it to be an extension method on this, and I think we're just gonna pick on this guy here, right?
Yeah,
Whatever that is, which is the window
Windows
driver.
Yeah, Windows driver of that's right. I can never quite remember the exact order of that.
Boom. So that goes to be driver, and everyone works. So as much, don't everybody hate me all at once, but I'm going to do this for the moment. Okay, so you're unhappy mostly because of the return value. Yeah, okay, great. So add null checks for all parameters. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks. Okay. And I think then what we do is we...
say basically just bring in that hunk of code.
This hunk of code, and I think what we're going to do, because I don't think there's a reason not to, static read only clock let's do this, clock get system clock. So for anyone who cares, the only reason I'm doing the property over the field is if I ever need to change this later, it makes it easier on the refactor. Odds of needing to do it, very low. But we're still doing it. Let's see. WebDriver exception requires import. This guy, we know something about the driver, so I'm very comfortable doing this. This is, in fact, my selector. You will handle my nullability. You will just straight up return. And then timeout goes here. And then this guy there's a generalized rule here on retries, and I'm trying to remember what it is. The minimum is you do halving, but I feel like I want to be a lot more aggressive than that. What did this guy call it for their fourth parameter? Sleep interval.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna get fancy, right? Time span nullable sleep interval, something more like that, right? So if sleep interval is null, sleep interval gets actually, maybe we'll do this. Time span interval gets sleep interval time span from milliseconds gets timeout total milliseconds divided by 10.
Okay.
Does that seem unreasonable?
No.
So shoot for
Not
10
at all.
retries.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody doesn't like it, we can go through and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey! Decline my tweet, please. I have a Logic App army that I will show off at some point. Tweet canceled.
Nice.
That watches for new YouTube videos and then sends me that email to either approve or deny the tweet notifying everybody of the YouTube video. And I'm guessing that's the video from like the 3 minutes where I went, oh, why is my thing failing? And I had to restart the stream.
Nice.
Okay, so something more like that. So now this is much cleaner.
Yep.
And you go away.
Yep.
Okay, so that I like a lot better. So this now we can make a lot nicer as well, right? So I want to actually hunt. The presence of the close button is actually what's going to trigger this. I delete this. I do time span from seconds 0.5, right? Because it shouldn't. It should only be a third of a second. I don't want to try any longer than that. Away we go. So, and I think a comment. The presence of the close button indicates the dialog is shown. Okay. Click, click, click. Close button. Okay, so here's the next question, right? How would you test this? I want to know when that's gone.
Yeah, so that gets into a very interesting space where we kind of have to start really tailoring the explicit waits for that scenario, because this was actually another thing that we talked about, I want to say like 2 years ago.
You are really testing my memory tonight.
Well, I'm trying to... I'm reaching back. Because if the element is still in air quotes here, the DOM, because that's ultimately what WinApp Driver is doing, is it's converting your WPF to XML.
Right. Visual tree or logical tree. It's doing something with one of my trees.
Right. So if the element is still in the DOM but hidden, then it's going to return false when you check if it's displayed. More likely, I'm guessing, is it's just not there anymore, which means your find element will throw. So you have to catch the throw and return false, but you only want to do that in situations where you know it's not going to be there. So now we're in this kind of weird scenario where the easiest way I have found to deal with this, and my coworkers where we're doing automated testing have found to deal with this, is just have another extension method that has a condition where it returns if it's not there. Because in most cases, we don't want it to return if it's not there. We want it to fail out so that we can look for a bug.
So a couple things, knowing the implementation of this. So this is actually being done inside of a pop-up, which is a lightweight window. So from a WPF perspective, these are separate windows.
Okay.
They just happen to be reasonably positioned, and you can kind of, I don't know if you can see it. There's a, oh, don't shake your window. That's a bad idea because stupid arrow shake. So they're separate windows, and the unfortunate part is at part of the animation for this is one of the first things it does is hide the dialogue, and then that overlay fades out.
Gotcha.
So this thing will technically disappear before that overlay does.
Okay.
Now, so I can, there's a couple thoughts. So one thought is we could go through and throw, because right now there is no, and so I don't know, I have a hard time translating this guy's window into what I'm seeing here, right? But this guy clearly doesn't have fully what I would expect, right? So there's some stuff here. It's got this custom thing, which, okay, fine. That's probably my user control. There's all of this stuff. I could go and maybe add accessibility IDs. I don't know do things show up in this list if you add accessibility IDs to them?
Not usually. So
Okay.
either it can find it or it can, and whether or not there's an accessibility ID is just, an added nicety.
So that's interesting to me because that means that my dialog host control is probably MIA.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't know, right? Like this thing said this guy is called dialog host overlay, so because that matches my user control up here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of assuming that this custom is user control.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a reasonable assumption.
Yeah.
But
So,
the root level element in here, and this is one kind of leads into my other question, right? The root level element inside this user control is a dialog host.
okay. So if you added an accessibility ID to that, I would expect it to show up. It would still, I'm guessing, it would still probably say custom, but you would then have an accessibility ID to grab.
So let's test that theory because this is one of the. So leading into this, the other thing I wanted to ask about, so dialog host, right? Control F5, is I wanted to know about if I wanted to get access to the WPF properties on these elements. Is that reasonably possible? So specifically, one of the things that I would love to do is to be able to get a hold of these elements and test the colors on them, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, color. Yeah, I can already answer that.
I was going to say,
colors,
so
no.
I can cheat, right?
Okay.
And if the answer is no, that's fine. I already know how to bitblit and pull bitmap images, and I'm fairly competent with OpenCV and Skia. I'm very confident I can do this with image manipulation and image analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I was just really hoping for something where it was like get attribute, because it lets me get it attributes, but I don't have a way of knowing.
Right.
Okay, so test show dialog. Right? So so this actually mildly concerns me, right? Like I want to know what the trigger is for controls being added to this. So the fact that this guy only shows up with a little bit is normal.
So the trigger, and I'm going to make a broad statement here because, again, I don't know the specifics. I tried to look into the specifics, but there's a certain part where you have to know the Win32 API, which is well beyond me.
Okay.
The trigger for this is anything that's an accessibility geared property. So, and when I say accessibility, I mean in the sense of accessibility for helping people with impairments use your app.
Okay.
So,
I would argue color falls into that, by the way.
Well,
Windows 10 is adding features for colorblind people. I would argue color is an accessibility feature.
Agreed. I'm going to show you a little trick here in a second to get at that. A WinUp driver currently doesn't. Well, actually, let me back that up. I don't know if it's WinUp driver. WinUp driver or the underlying API doesn't expose color as an accessibility property. Again, I tried to look into it, but C++ is a little bit beyond me.
Fair enough.
So I don't know quite the specifics, but there is. So a little bit of backstory. All of these tools are built on the UI automation library, which again is just an interface into the Win32 API.
Yeah.
But the UI automation library is kind of difficult to use. That part I was able to hack around in and do stuff with. But it's, again, just it's very geared towards, hey, these are things that are going to help people who are, blind, tab through your app and get a screen reader to read your stuff, for example. Now, having said that, I agree. I think color should be included in that. I don't know if we could feature request that or something on their GitHub, but if you ever want to see what properties are available, there's kind of a cool trick you can do to where if you go back to your test case and pretty much anywhere in the test case, doesn't matter where, at some point where you want to see what's on screen, new open new variable that's equal to, or that gets driver dot page source, I think is what it is. Yep. And if you drop a breakpoint on 32 and debug that,
is this going to do what I think it's going to do?
You're going to see what WinApp driver converted your WPF to, which is actually, well, it's pretty cool to see what it's doing.
That makes me very, very excited because it felt like I was getting a little bit of a disjoint.
Yes.
Okay, from this accessibility insights into this. Right. So, okay, this is ugly. Stand by.
Yeah. Can you view as XML, please?
Better. I'm going to open VS Code.
Okay.
Because I just got to see. Unfortunately, VS Code saves what you were doing before, and I just need to make sure I don't. I occasionally put things like keys on my.
Right.
Not a good idea. I don't recommend it. Oh, this thing cropped it. You jerks. Hang on.
Oh, say just go back to Visual Studio and view as XML. There it is. Not the greatest, but...
I want to copy and not be trimmed. Thank you. Now I can look at you with all the glory that is VS Code. And more importantly, I can zoom you in so that it's visible for the average layperson. Okay, so this is where it did it. Oh. Mm-hmm. This is gold.
So what did you say, get property? There is a thing that does that in Selenium. I believe it's...
So basically the properties attribute. I have access to are these. When it's saying get attribute, it's talking about these literal XML attributes.
Correct.
That explains why everything I tried failed.
Yep. So there's certain things like height, width, which there's properties for those anyways that you can get at. But it's pretty limited, unfortunately.
So
cover has come up on their GitHub a handful of times, and the answer from the maintainers, at least last time I checked, I think about 2 months ago, the answer from the actual Microsoft folks has been it's not something that they support at this time.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not overly concerned because I know I have height, width, X, and Y, which are relative to my window handle, which means I'll just bit-blit it right out. That's fine. Like, I know where the thing is. I don't actually care about, like, screenshotting underneath because I know there's the screenshot function built in.
Right.
Which was fine, but that looked like it wanted to save a file. And
yes.
If I bit-blit it, I can just grab the raw bits. Done.
The screenshot, I think it returns a bitmap, so you technically don't have to save it.
Yeah, but I thought it was like a system drawing bitmap, which meant referencing the WinForms library, and that made me feel dirty inside.
Fair enough. But height, width, X, and Y, you can get at. There's built-in properties. You don't have to do the get attribute.
Yeah. Call. Right. Those ones I came across and found.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really helpful. Thank you. This is gold. Okay, so my problem though that I have, and I suspect this is going to happen, is I added this dialog host and put an automation ID on it, and as far as I can tell, so there's 4 instances. This is class name, which I'm pretty sure is not it. That also appears to be something with the class name. That would go along with the list item. Oh, that explains why I couldn't find the thing by name.
Oh.
I was trying to hunt it by name, and I couldn't figure it out, and that looks like the fully qualified type name. Okay.
Dang.
Did not know that. So I hunted this out. I pulled the text element out of it instead.
Gotcha.
Which was fine, right? Like, and then this guy here. So because this is
Yeah.
one thing that I want to try and see if I can figure out how to do, is I would like, if people want to UI test their app and they've got a material design control in it,
Right.
how do I make this thing
Can you
appear in here?
can you do me kind of an just off the wall total guess? Can you see if you can add an automation ID property to line 10?
Right here?
Mm-hmm.
So not here, because this is an object property on the dialog host. I could put it here on the
Okay,
on
so
the
yeah,
thing,
maybe there.
on the thing inside, right? Like, because the dialog host itself is a WPF content control, and we actually have several controls like this, right? That they are custom controls. They derive from one of the built-in WPF controls, right? And I guess, to be fair, I kind of know the answer a little bit.
I would expect that to show up, because I think all the WPF controls inherit whatever the accessibility.
Hang on, I think I remember seeing something. I was digging through the user control source code the other day. UI automation peer. Ha ha ha! I vaguely remember something about this. You have to built-in automation peer. Yes, this here. Let me drop.
So
that.
do the custom controls implement automation?
So if the custom control derives from something that doesn't have a built-in automation peer class, so you'll note their ones that they call out are button, text block, label, etc. Examples of class that do not have them are things like borders, grids, canvas, etc.
Didn't we talk about decorators recently? Oh well, we'll come back to that.
I think we may. So I had a bug about decorators. I know I've talked about it on this stream recently, but there is. Yes, this is okay. So in order to make it visible, I probably need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
For your custom control set, it returns your provider object. Okay, so in this case, I'm trying to decide how to handle this, right? Because there is nothing currently, right? I mean, I'm in full control of this code, right? Because, again, ideally what I would love for this test to do is not have this.
Right.
And instead, oh man, I kind of want to use this to write my own little custom helper thing now. You've ruined me.
Sorry, or you're welcome.
Well, yeah, I kind of want to have a little WPF app that reads this XML in and displays it in a tree, which I'm guessing is kind of what this guy is trying to do. But this UI sucky, yucky.
Yeah, their older tool. I don't know. Their older tool had some big advantages over that one, but I don't know.
Yeah, because ultimately here, and I'll show you. So real quick, here's how. So the dialog host itself has an isOpen property, right? Open closed. It's not rocket science. But the key thing here is when the open property goes to false, right? That's the key trigger. This thing's going to change state. So the Visual State Manager triggers it and unless you've disabled transitions, this thing goes and executes the transition, which takes about 1/3 of a second, and that looks like I know my own library not very well apparently, but I clicking was not prepared. Too small. Data grid. Okay, go away. So this guy here, make sure I grab the right one. Oh, this is data grid, not dialog host. That will not help.
There.
Open the right one. So there are 2 dialog hosts, but we'll use the one that matters. This is the one that we were testing. And so it triggers and goes from open to closed, right? So this storyboard kicks off running, and you'll note it has a whole bunch of stuff. So, for example, things like watching the pop-up. So it'll toggle the state of the pop-up to false at a third of a second, right? It'll animate this content cover as that gray overlay fading out. So
Okay.
you'll note it'll animate the opacity of that thing fading out. And there's a trigger that says when that thing gets to... why is this going the other direction? Value at 0. Oh, okay, so it is. It's going from 0.56 down to 0 over the course of a third of a second. Okay, I just read that backwards before. And so when it gets down to 0, it'll ultimately go through and set the visibility off. And I'm wondering if it makes sense to have something on that. So I think maybe what I need to do is spend a little time looking at that automation peer. I think this is probably... So, in the interest of simplicity, what would you propose for this test here? Where I want... Because I could test for the presence of the element being gone, but again, it will disappear. And let me confirm that. I am fairly confident. I guess the pop-up actually stays open until a third of a second. So maybe I can test for the absence of the element.
As long as it remains in that page source that we looked at just a second ago,
it'll be fine.
As long as it remains there, you can totally test for the element to be not visible.
Okay.
The challenge is, at least in a lot of the apps we deal with, the element just gets removed when it's invisible. So that's where we have to do some weird try catches, return false. Probably the easiest way to guarantee that it's going to work is to wrap the test overlay button.click on line 47 in a WebDriver wait. And then if it's clickable, then, well, I should back up because that depends on if the element actually gets...
so here's the thing. These buttons are always available and able to be clicked.
Okay, so
that's the problem. Is I can't test for
I
can't test for this element because that's actually I'm legitimately trying to click on it while the dialog is shown.
Okay.
Right? Because I attempt to click on the button here and then assert that my clicks didn't increment.
Gotcha.
So that's ultimate. I'm legitimately trying to click on it, and so that passes because it's part of the visual tree.
So you could get actually kind of you could get interesting and wrap both lines 46 and 47 in a WebDriver wait. And that way, if the dialog is present, the clicks on line 47 shouldn't increment and will throw an equal exception or assert equal exception, one of the two.
You
can actually use a WebDriver wait to catch the equal exception and retry from there.
I love it. See, this is why I asked you to help me because I like that. That is brilliant.
Like, part of me feels dirty every time I have to do something like that, but at the same time, it's like, well, when you're testing third-party apps, when you don't have control of the code,
right? So like I had the same type of thing when we were doing tests with actual hardware. There's some times where legitimate sleeps are allowed. When there are physical things that you must wait on and you've got no outside trigger to trigger on, it's going to take about a second. Let's wait two just to be safe.
Right.
Especially if I'm sitting on the thing while it's going up and down. So, not that I've ever ridden on software I've written. That was a fun day. World's most expensive footstool. Okay. Sorry for everyone who doesn't get the reference. Project at work. Okay, so we're going to do a driver, and I think we will do a time span from seconds. Like this shouldn't go more than that, right? Time span from milliseconds. And in reality... because it's going to do this right away, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll check right away and then wait for the polling interval.
We'll do 200. Like, that'll be too fast. The first one should fail. Actually, in the interest of confirming that this works the way we want, let's make it fail. Right? So inside of here, what we're saying we're going to do then is we don't actually care about any of that. In fact, we don't even need the driver at all for this because we're just going to move both of you guys inside.
Yep.
We're not going to have a return, so we're just going to throw that away.
You will have...
Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
Oh, right.
Return 0 looks great to me.
My default is always bool return true.
Boom. You are the expert. So
line 48 is going to be equal exception, I believe.
That is the X unit one. Okay, so because we don't expect any of the other ones to throw, we know that I can click this even with the other things shown. I'm going to hide that for the moment. Let's see. Yeah, just trying to figure out how to do that. So that goes there. What is your problem now? Oh, hey, look at that.
No longer async?
No longer needs to be async. So
nice.
That'll be cool. Because the only reason it was async was because of that. So I think I will probably go through and my main window guy where it's looking stuff up, I will probably leverage our new method and might give myself a couple overloads for it. Because this is just handy. And then it makes it nice too, right? Like I can fall back on the built-in ones if I want.
Right.
That's a lot of errors.
Ooh.
What is going on? So okay, so the error is actually this. So it turns out you can't compile while you have the app running.
Oh, right.
That was a lot of errors to tell me that the app was already running.
Right.
So specifically, so I need to do some tests. I think there's still some, they've been fixing a lot of XAML designer bugs. So for anyone watching, be aware. If you've got a problem with Visual Studio, help, and then where is it? Send feedback. They legitimately watch these and will process it. So write a good bug report and they will fix it. So there was an issue with 2019-16.4 or something like that. Reported the XAML bug. They just reported back earlier this week that it is in the latest preview and asked me to retest.
Nice.
Which I've still not gotten around to, but to their credit, they communicated that they fixed the bug. They were able to easily identify it. To be fair, I gave them the live stream link and my repo. I was like, I can't make this much easier. Okay.
Nice.
So run. I suppose I technically didn't need to do that, but I kind of want to see this go. So last time I think it took like 3.1 seconds with all of my timeouts, and I'm sort of curious as to how much we can trim this down. Oh yeah, buddy. Oh yeah.
Very nice.
2.3 seconds, as fast as humanly possible. I approve. Especially since you were saying that these sleeps add up a lot over time. A lot. And I'm kind of thinking now that did I turn off that implicit? No. And I kind of want to kill it now. Because I don't think I want the timeout at all.
Right.
I think I want my default behavior to be fail immediately.
Right. Yeah, because I mean it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like if you're waiting on every single little thing when you don't need to, sure, quarter second here, quarter second there isn't a big deal. But again, you know, when you're running 100 or 500 or 1,000 tests and they're all waiting that long, that's when you run into situations where your test run takes, you know, many, many hours, which is just exhausting.
Yeah, I can understand that. Okay, and you answered my other question about the colors. Because I think that, so I don't think I'm going to hold up my PR to get the color stuff in, but I think I need to finish out these extension methods because and update these guys to leverage them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that'll be critical. And I assume this will run just fine in my pipeline now.
Probably. You might want to rerun it just to make sure that the implicit wait wasn't catching something we weren't already catching with an explicit wait, but
that's a fair point. So, and actually, so real quick, while we're talking here, sorry, Ian, I must have missed something. Wrong thing posted. I'm guessing I'm going to see a comment on something else at some point, but I don't actually see anything else from you, Ian. Okay, so the one thing I think I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to move this inside of here, right? So this only runs in a debug build, because I'm sort of using debug and release to dictate the difference between local and pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Ish, right? It means I can switch to release up here and get the behavior of my pipeline locally, which is convenient. But I think what I want to do is this £if debug, right? I'm gonna use my own window that I started. £else, let this guy run.
Mm-hmm.
And though you did warn me that this may have problems if the app doesn't start fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
Which I do somewhat worry. I think I would probably go to address it if that started happening. But for example, the main window view model is using reflection to iterate over itself and populate these test cases. So I can easily see if this list starts getting long, that the startup time will suffer. So, but if that is the case, I think what I do is I push this off, and I think it failing is a good thing, because I think it indicates that I've done something wrong in my app and probably need to address it.
Yeah.
The demo app, it may be problematic with, only because the demo app loads up like everything in the library.
Gotcha.
But we'll see. If it's not a problem, I'm gonna leave. I think I would rather leave it and let the WinApp driver do its thing. Because I'm gonna make the assumption that the people who work on it are smarter than me. Actually, let's confirm that real quick, because if I hit run, and I think this one works and we'll load on to the right screen, because
and the timeout is something like 60 seconds or 120 seconds. It's extremely generous, and you might be able to override it. I haven't looked into overriding it, because the last application that took that long to load popped up a window, the window came down, and a new window popped up. So launching it through WinApp driver didn't work anyway, because there was a very weird. Looks like,
because it had a splash screen type loading deal or something.
Yeah.
I could understand that. That would make sense, because I imagine what it does is it pops the process and probably waits to see a window handle.
Yep.
Which pro tip for anybody who's unaware, you cannot if you grab a hold. I'll show you the code here in a moment. If you cannot like this thing is using delays, and I'm kind of curious to see what kind of performance changes happen. But if you have a process object that you start and you're looking for the main window handle, you cannot get it. You need to create a new process instance. There is a bug that has since been fixed. Control C, Control V to the wrong chat. Got it. All good. Okay, so real quick. So I'm noticing this. That run took 1.1 minutes. That is miserable. You have now inspired me, because this sucks.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
But let me ask the question though, because this is probably good, because I think some of this is my own ignorance of not, and I'm probably gonna have more of these. I'll warn you, of where I start writing these tests and then I have to say, Mike, save me. How would you do this? Because like your wait trick is clever. So once again, I've got a custom material design control. In this case, it's called a drawer host. So it can have up to 4 drawers on either side. In this case, it's only got the left one, right? But more importantly, you click the button, there's that gray overlay again, and this thing slides out.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the problem being that those elements are there. It may be hard to see, but those elements actually fade in as the drawer is sliding out.
Okay.
So there is a fade. I imagine they probably show up. They probably show up as invisible all the time in the DOM. I don't know that for a fact. I haven't tested it, but I imagine that they're probably always there. So given that, how would you propose writing the test where this just clicks? We don't need to do this now. I realize I usually quit about 11 and I'm coming up on the 10-minute mark there, but
so I usually like to go with do the simplest thing first. If that doesn't work, add one thing. If that doesn't work, add another. So I would go with just a WebDriver wait wrapping either the find element or like a find element and dot displayed or probably dot enable, one of the two. And then if that doesn't work, then wrap the click. And if that doesn't work, then wrap something like the click and the expected response, kind of like what we did earlier where, we did the click and then the assert.
yeah.
There's a...
So the idea being effectively, if this list items click is throwing, we do that with an explicit wait is what we're proposing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's kind of interesting because of Selenium's approach of either I'm going to give you what you asked for or throw.
Yep.
There's no event handling, there's no flags, nothing we can kind of queue off of very out of the box outside of using WebDriver wait. You start getting super duper explicit and super duper like step by step in the test. So in this case, like I was saying, I would start off with wrapping the click in a WebDriver wait. If for whatever reason that isn't good enough, then it's, or the find probably actually. Then the click, then click, make sure that whatever we navigated to, maybe that amber primary color button is there.
Well, that was going to be my question, right? Because right now I'm not testing anything on these pages. I'm literally just clicking through them and making sure that they load without blowing the app up. Like, it's a very rudimentary level check. There's only been a handful of bugs that have managed to get through and actually even get past pull request verification without those getting caught. Because most bugs that look like they might be mildly risky, I fire the app up and run it. So it's usually the only times it's happened is something that looks fairly benign on like some resource, and it's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that was going to now break the demo app.
Right.
That's usually what happens. So that's the only reason for this clicking through. So I agree that the list item click should be in a wait so that it waits the minimum amount of time. That eliminates this delay, right? So if I put the explicit wait here, the only thing I don't know about though is testing to know when it's okay to come back and click this button. Does the visibility change if something's covered up?
It depends.
Oh, that doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy.
In most cases I've seen, yes, that will either be hidden, be disabled, or be removed from the DOM. I've seen one or two weird cases where overlays, the stuff underneath still acts like it's present, still acts like it's enabled. Super duper weird. In that specific case, I'm pretty sure they wrote their own custom. I think it was a WinForm app actually, but I believe they wrote their own custom controls. So in this case, I would expect that little hamburger icon either to be hidden, disabled, or not present. So you could test for that. When I say test.
And I believe when you're saying that, so main window, hamburger toggle button. So the displayed flag, I think, is what you're referring to, right?
Displayed or enabled. I would expect one of those to.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would expect one of those to appropriately, or it just not be there. That's another option.
Okay. I
Um,
would be a little shocked if that were the case, because just from knowing how the drawer host is implemented, because it's not
okay.
going out of the visual tree, and functionally we're literally just sliding a panel on top of it. So from a
Okay.
WPF perspective, it's still in the visual tree, it's still occupying space and rendering and all of that. It's just we've slid a panel on top of it.
Okay. So
So,
yeah, hidden or sorry, displayed or enabled.
got it. Gets the value of a JavaScript property of this. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a dream.
Right.
Um, oh,
Yeah. There's get screenshot and take screenshot. There's two different.
so, okay, so hold on, what does, oh, hello. So they
Oh,
actually have abstracted it away. Why did I feel like I saw an API that was going to WinForms?
there. It might be the one on the driver because there's a. I think it's take
Oh,
screenshot on the driver. There's get screenshot on the element. So you
got it.
might have
Because
been looking
this will be a screenshot of just my hamburger button, right? I imagine it uses those coordinate bounds to zero in
I
on it.
I believe so. Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Right.
That's really cool. I'm gonna have to look at that, because I think ultimately there's a significant number of bugs in the library that come up because something is the wrong color, or I can't configure color X in condition Y, right? Like,
Mm.
it's a theming library. That is the vast majority of what comes through. For
Mm-hmm.
example, there's an existing bug right now because we have, let's see here. Um, so when you have this hint, right, you can see password. It floats up as part of the line.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now what's happening is when you have a floating hint, it's setting the background explicitly to be one of
Oh.
the theme brushes, the background
Okay.
paper, which is fine right up until your background doesn't match the theme brush. Because then you
Gotcha.
see like a gray background and this white thing around the hint, and
Right.
it's hard coded. So there's a bit of an issue there, not gonna lie. And I introduced the bug, so if anybody wants to throw tomatoes, I'm your target. So, but it's one of those, as soon as I saw the bug come up, I was like, that feels like a great UI test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to because ultimately it shouldn't be setting the background here, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it should be setting the background here, right? Because if
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't set a background, you end up seeing that line cut right through the word password, which
Right.
is worthless, right? And so it would be really nice to grab this. Oh, that may be another problem with the get screenshot. It uses the element bounds, and we have controls that go outside their bounds. That could bite us.
Right.
Um, for things
Well.
like this, but it may not be that big of a deal, right? Like for example, this color zone up above, if you do drop shadows, typically the drop shadows expand outside of the element's bounds.
Right.
Which
Well, I mean, at that point, you could use WinApp driver to get the bounds and then just pad it, couldn't you?
you would have to know something about the element's properties. So, for example, the shadows thing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
to know how much to pad it, I would have to make some assumptions about which depth of shadow we were talking about.
Gotcha.
So there's that, right? But because there's a bunch of fancy stuff with shadows that you can do to clip them and do that
Oh,
kind
okay.
of thing. Because sometimes you only want the shadow on one edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by default, WPF is going to do shadows on all, because you can kind of see the shadow.
Yep.
The direction in our library is always 270,
Mm-hmm.
so you can kind of see the diagonal on it. But sometimes you just want to clip it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. For anyone interested, these attached properties, this is just a drop shadow effect in WPF with some pre-canned values. If you don't like the pre-canned values, add your own drop shadow effect. It's one line of Xaml. So I've resisted the urge of people asking for a lot of functionality to these because ultimately the shadows are there to support a very small set of use cases, and adding your own drop shadow effect is pretty straightforward. So, cool. Well, I think I'm at 11, Mike, and I don't want to keep you too late. So, any other bits of wisdom or awesomeness you want to drop on me to make me feel like to give me a false sense of confidence, like I know what I'm doing?
Well, I mean, you've done great so far, and I don't know if it's wisdom. Again, I think it's just the whole done enough to know what not to do. But yeah, I just make liberal use of WebDriver weights. That's the main thing.
Cool. Sweet. I am going to get these changes checked into my branch. I'm probably going to add the overloads just so that I can see them working and get those going, and then verify that things are actually flowing. Oh, one last thing I'm going to ask you. Do you have any bits of wisdom on what the appropriate, say you want to do some sort of debug outputting stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I noticed that the toString on these objects is, I won't say 100% worthless, mm-hmm. but it's pretty close to worthless because it gives you the, if we look at this, the runtime ID, which yes. I'm sure these mean something.
Right.
But as an output,
right.
Is there anything reason? So if I don't know anything about my elements, like I haven't gone through and set up something on them, is there a reasonable property I can look at to get a reasonable toString on them?
Usually the name.
Okay.
Usually, if not name, class name.
Got it. So name or class name is probably, and I think in this case, class name is more likely to be.
Or tag name, maybe tag. Well, tag name is going to be really generic. That's going to be like button.
That's better than the stupid numbers.
Right. I would say start with probably name, unless you can guarantee there's an automation ID on everything.
Well, and because this is the demo app, there's not. And I was trying to resist the urge to go through and put automation IDs on every single page.
Gotcha.
Ultimately, it probably should, right? But my goal is not to have the demo app be the automation example.
Gotcha.
Right? Like, well, I shouldn't say that. I want the demo app to demo how to do automation with the controls, right? So I want to be able to like drive into my dialogues page and say, look, if you are doing UI testing, you've got a dialog host. Here's what's available to you, right? But I don't expect to exhaust the breadth of what's possible. That's what this guy is for. Because ultimately, I'm stealing this idea from the Xamarin Forms team. They've got an app in their repo that when it fires up, it basically generates a list of a whole bunch of test cases.
Oh.
And it's literally, like, I think a lot of them have bug and ID, right?
Okay.
Somebody reported bug X. Here's a test that verifies that it's fixed. And it's just grown over the years.
Okay.
So I kind of figured, well, that seems to be working out well for them. Mm-hmm. All the best ideas come from knowing who to plagiarize from.
Right.
Let's go through and spin something and see how it comes out. So, because my goal is, I try to make this library easy for people to contribute to. Mm-hmm. And so I'm still debating about whether these projects get included, specifically the UI test one, whether this gets included as part of the main solution, or maybe if I add a solution filter or something so that not everyone needs it. Because I want everyone to be able to contribute, and expecting people to have to install like WinAppDriver just to be able to build the solution when most people probably don't care about the UI tests.
Right. Real quick, you don't need that FLA UI reference.
See, this is what I...
Sorry, I just saw that.
Both of them?
Correct. Yeah, you can whack both of them.
Sweet.
That's it's kind of a competitor-ish to WinAppDriver.
Ah.
Long.
This is why I was plagiarizing someone else's code and wasn't sure what I needed, so I just blindly took in all their references.
Right.
On a related note, I should probably go clean that project up now.
Right? Yeah. Long story short, Microsoft used to support a technology called Coded UI, which, again, these are all based off of that UI automation library I mentioned earlier. So Microsoft used to support coded UI. Coded UI was interesting. That's how we'll word that one. It did what it needed to do, but it was kind of a pain to work with. So the I don't remember the name, but they came out Test Stack White. They came out with this application or this test utility called Test Stack White. From what I understand from their comments, that was kind of their first stab at it. It became a little unmaintainable, so then they came out with FLA UI kind of shortly before WinApp came out. So FLA UI is it's a very user friendly tool, but unfortunately, it's kind of it's not as well supported as WinApp Driver from what I've seen. I could be wrong on that, but WinApp Driver is still pretty active.
Cool. Yeah, at least from what I saw poking around, it looked like there was a lot of information, but it also felt like you kind of have to sift through the weeds of Selenium docs and Divine. How does that translate into what I'm doing? Because
yes,
it seems like the number of people doing WPF UI tests are limited. The one example I found that has been hugely helpful, and I should go find the link for it and pull it in, is the Microsoft Calculator sample.
Yes,
because when they open sourced it, like they open sourced and said, here's how we're doing all the things, how we test our calculator to make sure it works.
Right, which is funny you mentioned that, because if that's the same one I've looked at, I kind of want to put in a pull request to fix some of their tests. If it was the same one I looked at,
it could have been like there was some weird stuff in it. Like it looked like they may have just blindly taken it and pushed it out the door, because it was the same sample that the Uno platform ported to iOS, Android, and Mac OS.
Gotcha. Were there try catches inside of unit tests or the test methods?
I don't remember. I was mostly looking at it because they were running it inside of a pipeline, and I wanted to see how they were.
Oh.
At the time, I was trying to figure out how to get my WinApp driver to work on the pipeline.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I showed everyone this. The magical incantation for WinApp driver on your pipeline is literally do that.
Very nice.
Felt really dumb when I figured it out, but the other thing I did is I did a stop task, and my mild improvement over there is I set an always condition, so that even if the .NET test, because if a task fails, like a unit test fails, this task fails, and then the remaining stuff doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
I wanted this to always shut down. I don't know if it matters, right? On a Microsoft hosted agent, I assume it's in a clean state every time. So shutting down may have not made a difference, but I was just trying to clean up my own mess. I made the mess, therefore I should clean it up.
Right.
So that was my thought.
Makes sense.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Mike, once again.
Absolutely.
It's always been great pairing with you. I feel like I learned a lot tonight, which has been great.
Okay.
Now I have unreasonable confidence to blindly charge ahead forward and see about getting the rest of this in, and then hopefully start UI testing more and more of the bugs that come in. So
nice.
Because there's been a few in particular I can think of where they flip-flop, and I'd like to pin those down and stop letting them flop.
Understandable. I have faith in you.
I am glad that you do. So, with that, I think I will say signing off. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see everyone next time.